Hey guys, Holly J here, aka Planet Ginger, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, please be sure to hit that subscribe button. Today I have another writing video for you guys, and we are going to be discussing Save the Cat Writes a Novel. Also, FYI, if you are hearing a lot of background noise, I don't know how well this mic is just isolating my voice, but there's a lot of birdies out here today. It is a nice day out here in the PNW, and I'm obviously trying to get some sun, and so are the birds. I personally am loving it right now, but I don't know how distracting it's going to be for this video, so you know, it is what it is. Like I said, we're going to be talking about Save the Cat Writes a Novel. This is a super highly talked about plot structure that people, I feel like, throw around a lot in writing videos, but don't actually give you a full synopsis of what the heck it is. So we're going to be talking about that today. We're going to be talking about what is Save the Cat Writes a Novel and how can you use it in your writing. First and foremost, let's just start off with the basics of what is Save the Cat. Where did it come from? I actually first heard of Save the Cat Writes a Novel. Well, actually, I first heard of Save the Cat, which was a screenwriting plot structure by Blake Snyder. And I actually found out about it in my screenwriting class. And it was funny because when I took that course, I actually was thinking, I was like, wow, this is such a clear plot structure that I feel like could be utilized in writing in general and like novel writing, because I've always been more interested in novel writing than screenwriting. And I was like, I could use this for my novel. Well, then Jessica Brody here, actually, when was this published? 2018. So yeah, that would have been right after I took my writing course for for screenwriting. So yeah, this came out pretty soon after I had already taken that screenwriting course. And so Jessica Brody, shout out to you, because you actually took Blake Snyder's Save the Cat beat sheets and you actually transferred it to how to write a novel with this. So I have already been a fan of Save the Cat well before it became kind of a popular thing for novel writing, and I love that it is taking off because I just think it's a really cohesive plot structure to keep in mind when you are writing a novel. There's a lot of different plot structures that novelists can use. One of them being Save the Cat. Another kind of similar one is the hero's journey. There's the 3-act writing structure, which actually I will say Jessica Brody utilizes in the Save the Cat beat sheets. She kind of separates them also into the 3-act structure and just gives you kind of certain points to hit in each act, which I think is extremely helpful. I mean, there's just so many different ways that you can write a novel. There's so many different plot techniques and plot structures to look at in today's world, but I just think that Save the Cat is probably my favorite. Personally, with my experience, I am a pantser. I'm not much of a plotter myself, so I definitely utilize the Save the Cat plot structure more for a revising technique to make sure that I'm hitting these certain plot points. And I think that a lot of these plot points I actually discover as I write my story, and I just want to make sure they're all being hit. So I definitely utilize it more in the revising process. Some people might want to actually plot their novel with this before they even put pen to paper. So it just kind of depends on how you actually write. That's just a little of my personal experience with Save the Cat, but without further ado, let's just get into what is Save the Cat. Also, by the way, I do want to make clear, I am not at all sponsored or anything. I just genuinely believe that this book has a lot of good guidance in it for writers. So not sponsored at all. Would I like to be sponsored? Probably, yeah. But I'm not sponsored. It is just, I genuinely just think that you can get a lot of information. So Save the Cat is 15 beats. Blake Snyder called it a beat sheet. So basically he gives you these 15 beats that you have to hit in your screenplay, screenwriting. But same thing goes for Jessica Brody's Save the Cat for the novel writing. These 15 beats are as followed. Number 1 is the opening image. Number 2 is theme stated. 3 is setup. 4 is catalyst. 5 is debate. 6 is break into 2. 7 is B story. 8 is fun and games. 9 is the midpoint. 10 is bad guys close in. 11 is all is lost. 12 is Dark Night of the Soul. 13 is Break into 3. 14 is the finale. And 15 is the final image. Something to note before I get going on what all these things actually are. The finale, Jessica Brody breaks into 5 different beats inside of that beat of the finale, which I think are extremely helpful. And then also another thing to note is all of these beats are split up into the 3-act structure, which I will put on the side of the screen so you guys can see where exactly the 3-act structure breaks on all of these beats. It's a good thing to know as well that, and this is really bad news for me because this is the part that I always get stuck on in my stories. Act 2 is by far the densest portion of your novel, and that's where your novel really needs to shine and where you need to know what's going on. Which sucks because that's the whole middle portion of your novel, and that's where I always struggle with my ideas, but we'll get into that in a minute. Okay, let's start at the beginning of your novel. Beat number 1 is opening image. That is literally just your opening image. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. It's a visualized representation of your character and like what their flaws are. It needs to be your first bang moment of introducing your character. And we need to see like what is wrong with your character? Why do we care about your character? It's nice if you can find one scene to introduce your character with a bang. This is going to be the first thing that readers read when they open your novel. It is extremely important to have something that not only hooks your reader, but also, like I said, introduces your character. This is literally going to be the first scene of your novel. The opening image is something that I generally try to not worry about so much in my first drafts. I usually try to think more in-depthly about my opening image later on when I've actually established my plot and my story a bit better. That's just my personal opinion. If you want to give a lot of thought to the opening image initially, that's fine. But I just have found once I get a better understanding of where my story's actually going, I can go back and adjust my opening image as needed. Number 2, theme stated. This is going to be the first 5 to 10% of your novel, somewhere in between that realm. Not always in that realm. It can be 1% to 10%. It can be, it kind of fluctuates, but generally it should be about 5 to 10% of your novel that this needs to be addressed. But this is literally the core of your story. This is what is your hero going to discover about themselves, or what is the lesson they need to learn? What does your character need that this story is going to give them? The theme stated, this is like not something that sometimes people know it going into their first draft, but I feel like this is also something that I realize later on in my story. I feel like I get to the end of the story and I'm like, oh, that was the theme. This is what I'm trying to say. To tie in the entire story, you want it to be initially kind of thrown out in the first part and then echoed at the end. And then you're like, oh, that's where my character went with that. Anyways, that's theme stated. Number 3 is the setup, and that is literally going to be the basically first portion of your story. This is going to be the introduction. This is going to be, what is your character's life? What does your character want? What does your character need? Who is your character? Where do they live? Who are their friends? This is the origin of your character. This is who is your character before all these transformations happen to them in this story. I think that that's the best way I can put it, is it's just the introduction of your status quo life, I think I've heard used. This is literally the life of your character before your story really begins. And this is extremely crucial. I think that a lot of newer stories, and I'm not generalizing because some newer stories totally do this well, but I think some newer stories kind of miss the setup, and I actually kind of miss this. I think that it's very important in stories to have a proper setup, and I just think that it's kind of being glanced over. I actually think that this has to do with social media and like our lack of patience just in general. Like, I think people want that instant gratification, so they want to be hooked into the story quick, and they do not want a lot of backstory. They don't want to know about this character's boring old life. They want to get right into the action. If you actually are writing a compelling book, I need to see what the character was like before they go through this big transformation. It makes me connect to the character more, and it makes me care more. And so I do think that the setup is extremely critical, and I think it gets kind of missed sometimes, maybe in today's world. I don't know. That might be something controversial to say, but I'm going to say it anyways. Then we got the catalyst. The catalyst is the groundbreaking, earth-shattering thing that happens that is changing your character. Like, your character is like, I cannot just return to my normal life after this thing happened. This literally needs to be earth-shattering. which then leads into our next beat, which is the debate. Like, even though we know that they can't return to their daily life, nobody in reality likes change. Like, I mean, we all say we do and stuff, but change is scary. It's intimidating. And, you know, real people in real life resist change a lot of the time. And so this is the section where your character is hemming and hawing about whether they actually are going to take this call to action, which again, catalyst, call to action, same thing. What are they going to do about it? And we want to see them kind of low-key want to go back to their original life, but they know they can't. And so the debate will be the end of Act 1 and the introduction into Act 2, which we get into our next beat, which is beat number 6, break into 2. So break into 2 is literally our introduction into Act 2, and it is where our main character accepts their call to action. So they have had the catalyst happen, and they finally are saying, okay, yeah, this is what I'm going to do about it. This is my decision. And it's really just that simple. It is your character initiating the story. This is when the story really begins. This is when we see your character beginning their journey or making that move or taking that offer, etc., etc. This is their decision. Beat number 7 is B story, and that happens about 22 to 25% of the story directly after the break into 2. And this is kind of almost like a secondary story. So like if you have the main plot line up here, your B story kind of runs in like parallel to your main plot. It's not necessarily a part of your main plot, but it could be interwoven in it. And it usually has to do with another character. A lot of times it's a love interest. I feel like the most common examples I hear of this is the love interest. The B story can also be a mentor figure, a nemesis, a friendship, something along those lines. But it's another secondary kind of story happening that runs parallel with your main storyline. I sometimes do kind of struggle with B stories, and I actually think that this is something that becomes more apparent in the revision process. So if you're worried about the B story in draft 1, I think you'd be surprised that when you actually get to revising, you are actually giving the B story enough attention. You just don't realize you are because it's not really a conscious thing, but it does end up just kind of happening. Fun and games. So fun and games are the 20 to 50%. A whopping 30% of your novel is going to be fun and games. And the best way I can describe fun and games, which I also struggle with this beat, is this is not only your hero just having fun in this world, but this is like the reason that your readers picked up this novel. What are you trying to sell this book on? Is this a book about this magical fae world? Is this a book about marine biology and like the ocean? Is this a book about like a cowboy romance? And so we need to be seeing the farm life in that. We need to be seeing this human interacting with fae. We need to see all the things that readers are picking up your story to see needs to be happening in fun and games. Readers are not necessarily picking up the story because they're like, oh, this is going to have a giant plot twist. I mean, yes, we like those plot twists, but also if a reader is picking up a story and they read the synopsis on it, a lot of the reason for that is because it has a cool world or a cool main character that we want to see. We want to see them doing cool things, and that's where fun and games comes into play. Your main character is getting to explore this world and like things are happening, you know, to not only propel the plot, but it's giving your readers what they actually picked up the book to see. Next is the midpoint, and the midpoint is literally going to be the middle of your novel. There's no other way to put it. It is the middle of your novel, and something needs to happen here to once again transition your novel from, okay, your character accepted the call to action, they're in this new world, they're having fun, they're doing their thing. Now the tides need to shift again, and we need to start getting more serious, and we need to start thinking about the finale of your book. I need to stop my lollygagging and I need to start focusing on whatever the bigger picture is going on. Jessica Brody also defines this as either a false victory or a false defeat. She gives some good examples in her book about this. I struggle with the false victory part. The false defeat makes more sense in my brain, but Jessica Brody does do a really good job of explaining all this in her novel. So after the midpoint, we have bad guys close in, which is 50 to 75% of the novel. If the midpoint is a false victory, this is going to be a downward spiral from that. If the midpoint is a false defeat, it's going to be an upward spiral from that. This is the transition basically from whatever happens in your midpoint, which the midpoint is a very brief beat. It's a very like just something happening. It's an action thing. So the bad guys close in needs to be the connection between your lowest point that your character's going to hit and whatever happens in the midpoint. So again, if your midpoint is a false victory, then you need to have your character tumbling down, 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 and then they're going to hit the all is lost, which is their bottom. If the midpoint is a false defeat, your character needs to be brought back up for the bad guys close in just to fall at the all is lost. So the bad guys close in needs to be the transition point between all is lost and the midpoint, if that makes sense. I don't know if that's the best way to explain that, but that's kind of how it works in my brain. So that's the way I'm going to stick with. Also, the important with the bad guys close in is you need to be really reflecting your character's flaws in this section. Your character's flaws need to be becoming an issue because they need to start changing. And they're still probably resisting that at this point, but they need to start seeing their flaws like red flags everywhere. So your character needs to start making those changes and stuff in the bad guys close in. Then we hit all is lost. This is beat number 11. Like I said, this is the lowest point of the novel. So your character needs to be hitting rock bottom here. I mean, all is lost is a very appropriate title to this beat because they really need to be sitting there thinking, wow, all is lost. Like, I have lost. I'm defeated. I don't know where to go from here, which ties hand in hand with Dark Night of the Soul. So All is Lost is more of an action beat. So this is like actually kind of where they get defeated. That pushes your character to rock bottom, where Dark Night of the Soul is their rock bottom. Dark Night of the Soul needs to be them sitting there in their defeat, wondering how they're ever going to make it out of this. They need to be miserable and sad and utterly defeated for this section to really pack a punch. If there's anything authors love and hate more than this, we are kind of sadistic people and we love seeing our main characters suffer. We love and hate it. But it's one of the joys of being an author is we love pushing our characters to these limits where they are actually at their rock bottom only to see them come out on top again. So I think that that's one of the most amazing things I love about seeing my own writing is watching my characters go through such hardships and getting out of it. The Dark Night of the Soul and All is Lost both need to be that rock bottom. Like your characters really need to be suffering here, again, for it to pack a good punch. Then we get into our final act, Act 3, and then we start off by breaking into 3. So this is your characters like, you know what, I can do this. It's their aha moment where they're like, you know, I really need to fix myself in order to get out of this hole. I need to fight through these demons. I need to fix my flaws. I need to find a way out of this. So this is where like your arc, your like character growth arc is nearly complete. So we're not even at the finale yet, and your character already pretty much needs to be realizing that they have these flaws, knowing that they need to fix them, is actively trying to fix them, but they're not quite there yet. They're not quite pushed to the point that they need to be pushed to. They're not quite there, but they're getting close. The break into 3 needs to be their aha moment. So it needs to be they realize what they need to do to fix all these problems externally and internally. So they're like, okay, let's get this together. Then we get into the finale. I really like how Jessica Brody does this. The finale technically is 1 full beat. She breaks it into 5 beats inside of the full beat of the finale. Her 5 beats of the finale is gathering the team, executing the plan, high tower surprise, dig deep down, and execution of the new plan. So basically, your finale needs to be kind of an up and down ordeal, which is why I think she breaks that beat down a little more simplistically. Blake Snyder, I think, has this in 1 beat, and then she broke it down into an additional 5 beats because there is kind of a lot that happens in the finale. It is 80 to 99% of your book. This is the end. This is the big gut punch that your readers are waiting for. This is where everything connects and everything seems like it falls apart, but it doesn't. It's really critical that this gets accomplished well. When we start off the finale, we have to gather the team. And this is literally just a moment where you're watching maybe old faces return. Literally, your main character is getting their team together in order to go and tackle whatever it is that they need to do. But I really like gathering the team moments in like big fantasy stories stories where all these old characters come back into the picture and they're helping with this like final battle, this would be that moment. This could literally just be also getting necessary tools together in order to accomplish something. It could be getting the necessary mental help in order to accomplish something. It's your character getting what they need in order to progress. So it doesn't necessarily have to be gathering of people. It could be gathering of anything, really, that your character needs to get together in order to get to the finale. Then we got executing the plan. So the finale usually has like 2 plans in it. And the first one is executing the first plan. They've gathered their people and they've decided, okay, this is how we're going to defeat whatever it is we're defeating. And it has to seem kind of impossible what they're trying to do. It has to seem like they need a lot of luck on their side. They need everything to run perfectly, smoothly, etc., etc. Sometimes this is where the B story makes a sacrifice. It doesn't have to happen, but sometimes if there's going to be a sacrifice in the story, this would be the good time to do it. And then we got the high tower surprise. This is where their plan that they originally thought was going to work is going to get flipped on its head. The battle's commencing, and then something happens that completely catches all of our heroes off guard. And so this is almost like another catalyst, really, because it has to propel your main character to be like, oh my gosh, we are losing and I don't know what to do about it. Then we jump to the dig deep down. Dig deep down is exactly what it sounds like. It's our main character digging deep to try to finish this fight once and for all. It's almost like another Dark Night of the Soul or like All Is Lost. It's almost like another version of that in the finale where they, again, completely think they're defeated. There is no way around it. They are defeated. And in this moment, it's important to have the theme come back into play because whatever they have been battling against in themselves the entire time needs to be critical in this next part, which is the execution of the new plan. Whatever officially defeats the whole premise of your novel needs to come from your character's flaws. It needs to directly correlate with that. So whatever ends up happening at the end to bring them out on top, it needs to correlate with the character's flaws directly. The execution of the new plan and the final image kind of are hand in hand because the final image is your finale of the story. It is the end of the story. It's literally the final scene of the story. I mean, yes, it's the after shot and it's the conclusion of everything, but if you have your story written extremely well, you have your final image connect to your opening image in some kind of way, whether it's like mirroring each other, whether it's like speaking of the same theme. If you want that pretty bow on your story of like a well-written story, you are going to have your final image be mirroring your opening image somehow. I think that those are the most satisfying endings because it is like, wow, that was a full arc if I've ever seen one, you know? So the final image is extremely critical and the execution of the plan gets us to that final image at the end. So there you have it. That is actually full blown what Save the Cat Writes a Novel is. The reason why this is so popular is because, one, I think that it's nice to have a little bit of stability when you're writing your novel. Again, if you're a pantser like me, you're kind of just writing off vibes in a way. Like I do have some plot points and some things I want to include and like ideas and characters and all that stuff going on in my head. But when I just start writing on my computer, it just kind of flows out. For me personally, like I've kind of mentioned before, I like using Save the Cat as a guide once I get into the revision process to make sure that I'm actually hitting all of the proper points that I should be hitting in order to have a compelling story. If you are more of a plotter, I would recommend using Save the Cat probably initially before writing your novel because it just kind of gives you a nice guide of plot points that you need to be hitting in order for you to have a compelling story. Another thing I'd bring up in this Save the Cat novel that Jessica Brody wrote is she has this ending section that is kind of interesting and she talks about different genres and what the different genres might have for their Save the Cat structure and how it could be different depending on the book that you're writing. And I think that that's extremely important to keep in mind is all stories are different. So a lot of my examples obviously were fantasy based and a lot of these plot points you might think are more like fantasy driven or like these big epic battles and stuff, but they really are not. And Jessica does a great job talking about that in this book and giving you different ideas of like how different stories can relate to these different beats, which I find extremely helpful. I have this book so highlighted and annotated. Every time I kind of get stuck, I do open it up and it gives me different ideas and different perspectives on like how to hit all these different beats. Like I've also mentioned, my biggest Achilles heel is the middle of the book. I struggle so much trying to get my character from A to Z. I know what A is, I know what Z is, but to get them to Z is a little more challenging for me, because I think the thing that I do is I want to cut more of my story than actually have a full-blown character arc to it. So it's a matter of like what is irrelevant to my story and what is relevant and what needs to stay in there and how much of each buildup needs to happen. If that makes sense, that's what I struggle with. And that is why I've kind of just been trying to keep this all in mind. But for my first draft, and I don't even want to call it first draft, I've been drafting this story for a really long time, but every time I get to the middle portion, I'm just like, oh gosh, do I want to change the beginning? But it is technically my first draft. And when I'm in this first draft, I'm really just trying to get the words on the page and get a plot figured out before I really start being structured, as in something like Save the Cat. So I hope that this video was kind of informative for you. I hope that you kind of understand why Save the Cat is so popular, and maybe you want to consider utilizing some of this in your story. Take everything with a grain of salt. Do what works for you. Everybody writes so differently and everybody does things at different times in their writing. Do whatever makes sense for you. But I just thought it was nice to give you guys a full overview of what Save the Cat is, and if you want to use it, great. If you don't, great. It's popular for a reason. And I think that there's a lot of good information that you could get out of not just the beat sheet I shared with you in general, but also from the novel itself. I do recommend probably either renting this from the library or getting it yourself, because she does have a lot of details in here that I think could be beneficial in anyone's writing process. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that this was helpful, or I hope you got some sort of information out of this that you didn't already have. Again, if you haven't already, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, and we will see you on the next video. Bye bye.